So how do organisations use cyber threat intelligence? This goes back to this kind of key question, is why is cyber threat intelligence useful? This is really actually quite a difficult question to answer, and so we need to introduce some more concepts to answer this question. And this is this idea of the threat landscape. So you often hear people talking about the threat landscape, and what does that mean? How does that sort of fit in together? What it is people imagining their organisation, their decision maker, being active in a landscape within which there are a number of threatening actors active within that space. Now then, this is actually quite a useful thing to think about, because not all of those threats are actually going to attack your organisation. Some of them are just not bothered, they're for whatever reason. However, some of them really do want to attack your organisation, and the idea of the concept of the threat landscape really helps you do that. So really, CTI at its core is about context. It's about adding context and understanding to where your organisation sits. So are you going to face exactly the same threats if you're a bank versus a nuclear provider? No, of course you're not. That's obvious, but what threats then are you going to face, and what defences should you be taking? So as we previously covered, CTI is really an emergent field in cybersecurity, and cybersecurity is feeding into a number of other business and security areas. So just to think about these and to enumerate them a little bit more, is the classic areas that cyber threat intelligence feeds into and provides value within the security practice are areas like the Security Operations Centre, so the SOC Centre. Incident response, absolutely, we provide value in that space, and other more mainstream activities such as patch and vulnerability management. What should I patch first? Well, that's a question that we can really take forward and answer as well. Also, CTI feeds from all of these areas as well as into those areas, and that's a really important point to remember as well. So by doing this, CTI creates a deeper insight into the nature of the threat and how it can be countered. That's really the objective of what we're trying to do here. Right, another part that's really useful to understand about cyber threat intelligence, and specifically how it can be valuable, is the nature of the landscape, the threat landscape. So cyber threats are ever evolving. Most people know that. That's kind of part of the scene, isn't it? Computer hackers are always trying to evolve and build on their strategy and techniques. However, it's also the threat level is also increasing of cyber threats. So if you look 10 years ago, when I started working in CTI, the types of threats that we were seeing out there were nowhere near the level of potency, ambition, capability that you see on an almost daily basis these days. So you can see this with the emergence of ransomware. You know, if you'd have said to me, even 5 years ago, that you'd be seeing the ransom payments that ransomware operators are demanding from victims, I wouldn't have believed you. I wouldn't have thought that was credible, let alone some of the issues that we've seen. I think just to round this one out is the emergence of this idea of an extinction level event for the business. What the extinction level event is a cyber attack that is just so devastating, it totally annihilates that company. They just lose everything to the point that they cannot recover. That is new. Okay, 10 years ago, there was no such thing that I had come across of an extinction level cyber event. Yes, people were talking about it, and they were saying, oh, Digital Pearl Harbor, that type of thing, this type of event is coming. That was certainly on the radar and on the horizon. But it's only really been recently, in the last few years, you've seen that actually being realised. Within this context, you cannot wait till that threat metastasizes on your intranet. You have to know about it before it's coming, because if you wait till it comes, you're inviting that extinction level event. So you can see here within the context of cybersecurity in the wider threat landscape, the importance of CTI, I would argue, has actually gone up. Knowing about that threat before it hits you has never been more important. Also, as well, is this idea that the corporate network is becoming larger and more diffuse. So I spoke about the example of when I started work, and that was sort of circa 2003, where part of that job within an IT software house was going around and delivering computers to people who didn't have them, and showing them how to turn them on. Admittedly, there was only a couple of times I actually did that, But the point is, even in that sort of period, sort of 2003, there were still organisations that didn't fully provide computers to all their employees. That's going to totally change now. Like, you can barely think of an organisation that's like that anymore, that doesn't have that high level of digital connectivity. Also, as well, there's this idea of the network becoming more diffuse. And what I mean by that is, if you think about the networks, 10, 15 years ago, they were desktop computers with people working inside a physical office. That's totally changed now. You've got laptops, you've got smartphones, you've got iPads and tablets and things like that, and you've got people on a global level working from a distributed environment because of COVID-19. That makes the network more diffuse. The more diffuse the network is, the more difficult it becomes to monitor. The more difficult it becomes to monitor, the greater the door is for an emergent cyber threat that you just cannot see. Okay, so that's a big part, and that's a big change as well, that's really driving forward the need for cyber threat intelligence within that context. This is to the point that we were discussing a little bit earlier about how cybersecurity is a defensive activity. However, cybersecurity can be more proactive, in my opinion. You can be a proactive defender in what you're doing. And the reason why you need to do this is because you cannot wait till that threat is on your system. You need to do something about it. What CTI does is allows defenders to do this in a structured way, without just sort of guessing and sort of just making it up as they go along. That's a big thing as well. So cybersecurity in practice within the organisation. Let's have a look and a review at some of the business units that I spoke about earlier, and let's see how they could potentially go about using cyber threat intel. So take, for example, the Security Operations Centre. That's the hub of larger organisations for security operations, so not just CTI. So we can feed directly into tangible security, such as firewalls. So, for example, indicators of compromise. That comes from cyber threat intelligence research. That's something that can just go directly into an established piece of technology that can be used to block attacks. Incident response as well. We can do attribution. So, for example, attribution is knowing what piece of malware is attributed to what group. That's really important because then you can look at the behavior of that group inside the network outside of the malware. So, for example, you've got the malware behaving on there. However, the way that they may steal data might not necessarily be linked to that initial compromise. So you can see you can drive and shape the way that incident responders are dealing with that incident. Patch and vulnerability management is simply about prioritization. One of the big trends at the moment within ransomware cyber criminals is they're not doing anything particularly new. They're just doing it really, really quickly. So they're operationalizing vulnerabilities really, really quickly. With cyber threat intelligence, you can use that to build a business case around why you need more resources to be able to patch and triage vulnerabilities much, much quicker. Human resources. This is an emergent area as well, but CTI can definitely feed into this. So the obvious area here is around crisis management. So, for example, if a cyber crisis is called, what are the human resource policies in regards to employees speaking to the media? This, in my view, this awareness and this intersection with this business unit comes from the Sony hack by North Korea a few years ago, where the employees of that organisation were tweeting about what was going on, they were speaking to the media, and it was a bit of a public relations disaster. I've been in companies that have cyber incidents after that, and usually the cyber incident is declared, hotly followed by an email from Human Resources reminding you that you should not speak to the media about this. Okay, that's a minor thing, but nonetheless, that's from a cyber threat intelligence analyst who said, actually, you should potentially think about this. And the wider area, obviously, of business risk management. So business risk management covers everything from floods, natural disasters, physical robbery, and things like that. But cyber can impact all of these areas as well. So, for example, if the building schematics turned up on the open internet, that's a crossover between physical security and cyber security. To add a bit more detail to this, is people often talk about what is actionable cyber threat intelligence. Well, I'd say it depends on who you're going to be giving that to within the business. And I want to introduce this idea of strategic, operational, and tactical levels of the organisations. These exist within all organisations, even really, really small ones. And what they talk about is the sort of goals that exist at those levels, and also the activity that's existing at these levels as well. So at the strategic level, that's the big picture. So for example, if it's a car company, they want to make cars that people want to buy. That's a strategic goal, absolutely. At the operational level, that's where they put their factory. Are they going to put that in China? Are they going to put that in Germany? Where are they going to put it? And at the tactical level, who they're going to go and get to work for them. Okay, so you can see there that you've got that relationship between those levels. You also have personalities and activities within those levels as well. So at the strategic level, it's the board or the executive leadership team, and it's the senior decision makers. So the most obvious personality within this space is the Chief Information Security Officer, to which you're often working. At the operational level is the day-to-day kind of operations of the business. So this is where the Security Operations Centre sits, and the sort of security control element of the business. And the tactical level, this is where you get a lot of activities and people being hired into to do. So this is where you get threat hunting, log analysis, and things like that. And cyber threat intelligence can feed into all of these areas, but it feeds actually quite different products into all of these areas. And if you get those areas mixed up, then your threat intelligence can fall flat. The reason is because the actionability, so the ability of somebody to actually do something about what you're telling them, actually changes quite significantly at these levels. So to define actionability for you is threat intelligence that a decision maker can take action on. Now then, a decision maker can be the most junior SOC analyst, because that individual is still making decisions about where they look for threats. That is absolutely a decision maker. Equally, a decision maker can be the most experienced member of the executive leadership team who's trying to make a multi-million-dollar decision about which security technology they get in. Those are both decision makers, but you can see the type of intelligence that you're going to give to that decision maker is going to really, really vary. A good example that I found doing a bit of research on this was by the cyber threat intelligence company CrowdStrike, a very reputable company active within this space. You can see this graphic with the reference below. And what they're trying to communicate here is a number of things. So you can see the tactical, operational, and strategic level of the business. What they're trying to show with the arrow and the products hanging off it is, in their assessment, what type of cyber threat intelligence should be provided at what level of the business. They've also added this arrow in where they're saying that threat research is more difficult than creating a threat feed. I'm not necessarily sure I agree with the arrow, but I do agree with the allocation of the different types of intelligence products at the different types of levels. So are threat feeds useful at the tactical level? Absolutely they are. Are they useful at strategic level? Not so much. Actually, what would a board member do with 10,000 different data points? Meaningfully nothing. However, focused threat research, so for example, of the risks of setting up a business, the cyber risks of setting up a business, say for example in Hong Kong, large thematic written report, an executive leadership team member would absolutely see some value and see some actionability from that. And conversely, if you gave that threat research down to the tactical level, they'd be like, well, why are you giving me this? This is nonsensical. So just take a moment and soak in what's being shown to you here. Cyber threat intelligence comes in many different forms. So it can be literally data threat feeds, or it can be large written reports, or it can be incident response and all those kinds of things. I would argue that all of these products are as actionable or as unactionable as each other. What is the decider of actionability is actually which part of the business they are allocated to, be it the tactical, operational, or strategic.